Yeah, give us a few minutes. I think Tom is checking to see if he can get his video up. He was only, I think he's on audio.
I would be happy to do that. And I apologize, we're starting a few minutes late anyway. We were finishing up another meeting ourselves. So I'll wait a few more minutes.
Okay, I think he says we're good.
All right, I'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. It is October 4th, 2022. I'm Hearing Officer Nicole Kinsey with the Administrative Hearings Office of the State Water Resources Control Board. This is a status conference on water right application 30166, filed by El Sur Ranch for a permit to appropriate water from the Big Sur River in Monterey County. This status conference is being conducted by Zoom web conference and is also being broadcast live on the AHO YouTube channel. Both the audio and video are being recorded, and we will post files of this recording along with the Zoom generated transcript to the AHO FTP site. The YouTube recording will also be available on the AHO YouTube webpage. If at any time you are experiencing technical difficulties trying to communicate with us, please send an email to the AHO at adminhrgoffice@waterboards.ca.gov. AHO staff will be monitoring the email inbox. Assisting me today are several staff of the Administrative Hearings Office. We have Nicole Mullen, Amy Blunk, Skylar Anderson, and Kyle Wooltridge. I'd like to go ahead and move to appearances. To do that, I will identify each of the entities that have filed NOIs. And as I do, please unmute your microphone and state your name. I will start with the applicant, El Sur Ranch or James J. Hill III. And Mr. Berliner, you are on mute.
Mark Blum appearing.
Good afternoon, Mr. Blum.
Good afternoon.
I'm sorry. Does that work?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
And Julianne Ainsley.
Thank you.
That
Thank
should
you,
be the
Mr.
three of
Berliner and Ms. Ainsley. California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance.
Chris Schutz for California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Schutz. Center for Biological Diversity. Do I have Ventana Wilderness Alliance? Trout Unlimited. Carmel River Steelhead Association. Monterey Waterkeeper. I think I do have California Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Yes, good afternoon. Katie Miller and Nancy Murray for CDFW.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. Miller and Ms. Murray. California Department of Parks and Recreation.
Hi, this is Emma Severson for California State Parks.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. Severson. And National Marine Fisheries Service.
Good afternoon, Joel Casagrande with NOAA Fisheries.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Casagrande. Is there anyone else who has not, who intends to participate today and who has not identified themselves? I don't think so. We're a small group. Good. So I think this will be a very short status conference. I appreciate the filings that I received on September 22nd about the items in dispute and proposed for mediation. I think I'll turn to each of you, but my general sense based on those filings is it looks to me like there's a good amount of difference between the parties on what items might be appropriate for mediation and what issues are in contention versus those that had previously been negotiated. I will tell you my general sense based on that is that what I'm thinking is that it would be appropriate to move forward to through the filing by the applicant of the amended application and change petition, so that we see in more detail what exactly the project is, and that after that has been completed, then turn back to talking about whether mediation would be a productive avenue. The reason for that was just because it seems to me that there's a fair amount of disagreement, and it would be helpful to go through the two parts of this. One, there's a fair amount of disagreement, and so I think having that amended application may clarify exactly what the project proposal is. Second of all, once we have that, if we need to go through an additional noticing process, then we'll have a better understanding of who the protestants are and who the parties may be to any supplemental hearing. And that may help with determining who should participate in mediation. So that was my reaction to the filings. But I will look to each of you to see if you have any comments on that thinking, which is generally that we should get this amended application and change petition. Once that is filed, then we would come back to the possibility of mediation and what exactly those items should be. So I will turn first to you, Mr. Berliner. Do you have any comments on either the filing you made on September 22nd or any of my comments just now? And you are still on, it looks like you're back on mute.
Sorry. I was assuming that the mediation would occur after the draft revised application had been filed anyway. So in case there were any issues raised by the draft application that would be needed, that where further discussion would be needed. So I guess I don't really have any difference of opinion with you that it's appropriate to have that draft application on file so that we have all the issues in front of us and then determine, okay, what's still outstanding. And you had directed that we reach out to the other parties, which we have done, and we're still in some discussion and have actually a proposed schedule with the Department of Fish and Wildlife to have some discussions with them. And it would be my intention to continue talking with the other parties as well. So we should know more by the time that November 1st rolls around, and everybody will have a chance to see the application. I'm not expecting there to be any surprises. There's going to be the proposal for the reservoir and for the additional or replacement place of use, since the land that's going to now be under the reservoir is unavailable for pastures. So that would be the proposal. There won't be any change in the overall amount of diversion. So either up or down. So I think people pretty much know what they're going to see. We may ask for some intra-year adjustment on when pumping into the reservoir occurs, but that's not finally determined yet. We're waiting to hear from the engineers on that. But I think it will be helpful for everybody to have that draft in front of them. And then if there are issues where we need to make some modifications, we have that chance during the due course after November. So, in my head, I was thinking, well, we're probably going to do mediation then in either later November or sometime in December.
Thank you. That's helpful. I think I'll turn next to you, Mr. Schutz. Do you have any comments on any of this?
No, I think it's fine to defer deciding on mediation topics to see if there are any more raised by the application, the draft application, as Mr. Berliner framed it, particularly if that is expected as early as November 1st, which is a date that had escaped my memory. I will say that one of the issues that I was hoping to resolve in mediation at some point is what actually is agreed to and what is not. And that was one thing, that element that I added, that I don't believe either the department or the ranch had specifically included. And I've felt for a while since since we reconvened this summer, that it would be a good idea to try to nail that down, to just understand the extent of what we're agreeing on and what we're not, and therefore sort of defining the extent of the mediation.
And let me follow up on that, Mr. Schutz, to make sure I'm understanding you, that one of the, you're proposing that one of the elements of mediation should be an agreement as to particular facts, underlying facts, or agreement as to the scope?
Agreement as to whether, excuse me, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Agreement as to whether this statement of stipulation in the April 15th, 2019 joint statement by the department and Elster Ranch still holds, at least for the ranch and the department.
Okay.
The NGO parties never stipulated to that. And so a further question would be whether the NGO parties were willing to stipulate to those, or to some subset of them.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Schutz. I'll turn next to the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Ms. Miller or Ms. Murray, would you like to comment on any of these issues?
No, I think waiting until after the application is in makes sense. Then we can have a mediation with all the topics considered.
Thank you. Ms. Severson, do you have anything to add?
No, I agree with the order of operations. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Casagrande, do you have any comments?
No, none from me. Thank you.
Thank you. So it sounds that to me that we can somewhat defer this issue. We'll revisit it. I'm sure the next step will be to set 1 or 2 additional deadlines and a follow-up status conference. So we'll have a chance to talk about this issue of mediation and the timing at that time. I would like to talk about setting a deadline. I think it makes sense to set a deadline for comments by the parties on the draft amended application and change petition, so that those will come in an orderly manner. So my next question is going to be, what is a reasonable amount of time? I would like to keep this moving. I've also committed that the AHO, in conjunction with the division, will provide the applicant comments. I'm not going to set a deadline for that because but I will try to do it in as timely a manner as possible. And in theory, I will try to stay pretty close to whatever deadline we set for the other parties, although I do think it would be helpful for the AHO to see the parties' comments to help inform our own comments. So my next question is going to be one, well, I think what would be an appropriate deadline for comments on the amended application and change petition? And then are there any other deadlines we should set other than setting a follow-up status conference sometime thereafter? So I will turn first to, I will just look to the parties. I'm sorry, the responding parties. So I'll turn first to Mr. Schutz. Do you have any thoughts about how much time you might need to take a look at the applicant's draft application to provide comments?
I'm not sure exactly what the extent of it's going to be, but my best sense is something on the order of 2 months.
2 months.
Mm-hmm. And as a point of clarification, we're expecting that on, is it true that we're expecting that on November 1st?
It is. I set a deadline in the last status conference, so that is
Thank
a set deadline of November 1st for the draft version, not a formal submission to the division. That this is a draft that we would then comment on before the applicant would then be required to submit a final version to the division for formal acceptance.
Thank you.
Ms. Miller or Ms. Murray, do you have any comments?
I don't know off the top of my head if I can estimate. I would expect though 45 to 60 days, something similar to CSPA.
And then I will just look, well, Ms. Severson, do you have any comments on this?
No, I would agree with that time frame. Thank you.
And Mr. Casagrande, do you have anything to add?
No, 2 months seems reasonable.
Okay. I was going to go with 1 month, but since there seems to be a general consensus, I'll give you 2. But I do think within that time period, I think it is reasonable for me to commit, at least informally, to the AHO and the division providing comments within that time period as well, so that we can keep this moving forward. I think it makes sense to get those comments in before we reconvene for another status conference. I don't see a reason to reconvene for a status conference before then. But let me look at the calendar and see what approximately 2 months would be. It would be in the new year, but let's see. I certainly am not going to set anything for January 1st. So let's, or really right before January 1st. So my initial thought is to set a deadline of January 6th, 2023 for comments on the draft amended application and change petition. And then setting a status conference shortly after. I'm looking at possibly the week of, please look at your own calendars, but the week of January, sometime the week of January 9th, either maybe the 10th, 11th, or 12th. Well, let's start there. And if are there conflicts to that can't be worked, or travel plans or other things that you know are would conflict with the 10th, 11th, or 12th?
Well, my thought is that if we're going to get the comments on the 6th, that by the time I can get Provost and Pritchard to take a look at them and provide a reaction, that's too short of a turnaround. So if we want to allow for that, I'm going to need some more time. If that's something that can be done subsequent to that, then as far as I'm concerned, that week is fine.
Well, let me back up in my mind of what it is I want to accomplish. I think that makes sense, Mr. Berliner, if you had more substantive responses to the comments. That probably makes sense. We could get more done in a status conference.
We could have just 2 status conferences for
right.
that matter.
We could, although I don't know what else we would be, I'm trying to think of what else we need to accomplish at that point, which I'm not sure there is much other than responding to the draft and the comments. So maybe it makes sense to set the status conference out a little ways, I mean, a couple weeks after, so that your consultants have time to take a look and you have more substantive feedback.
Yeah, I think that would probably add to the productivity of the status conference. So
I think that's right. How much time would you ask for to have some kind of, I know it's difficult to assess, but
yeah, I would be guessing, but I would think at a minimum of 2 weeks. But I think in part it's going to depend on the nature of the comments that are submitted. But they're very technical engineering type comments that may take a little bit more if they're just questions and clarifications, that's probably relatively quick. But I mean, you know how these consultants work, they're off working various tasks. And so I would obviously give them a heads up that this is coming in that time frame, but they can't just devote full time to it. So I just don't know.
Right. No, and that's fair. So let's look at the week of starting January 30th for a follow-up status conference, and we'll set it for then, and we'll see how much we can all accomplish before that time. But is there anyone with irreconcilable conflicts the week of January 30th, just to start us off for our discussion on setting a date? And with that, maybe let's focus in on the afternoon. If I were to set a status conference for 1 p.m. on January 31st, is there anyone who has a conflict with that date and time?
I do, but I don't know that I'm critical for that discussion.
Well, let's see if we can do an easy resolution, even if you may not be critical.
That week, Wednesday and Friday are the only days that work for me. But
Well, let's look at Wednesday, February 1st at 1 p.m. Does that work for everyone else?
It's fine for me.
Great. All right. So I will set a status conference for February 1st at 1 p.m. I'm going to set a deadline for getting in comments on the draft amended application and change petition for January 6th. And these are both in the new year, 2023. We're already doing that. In the meantime, so we're setting things out for a little while. I appreciate the flurry of status conferences we've had. I think we've made a lot of progress, at least in moving this forward. I will expect to see the draft amended application on November 1st. I will be engaging the AHO and the division to work on comments, and I know all of you will be busy working on your comments before we reconvene again in February. But before we break until February, is there anything else that we should talk about? And if anything else comes up and we need a status conference, please feel free to just send something in to the AHO, CC the parties, and we can set something up in the interim. That's not a problem. So is there anything else we should talk about before we break today? All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your participation, and I will see you in February, if not sooner. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You.
thank you.
Thank you.